All right, thank you all and welcome to the discretionary funding webinar this evening. I will be presenting. My name is Shaniqua Moore and I am the president and founder of the Moore Consulting Services Incorporated firm. And I'm really excited to have all of you here this evening. Just so you know, the chat has been disabled, so you won't be able to put anything into the chat box. However, if you do have any questions for this evening, feel free to submit it in the Q&A box. That is the portion of the Zoom that you'll be able to utilize if you have questions for me and you want to ask towards the end of the webinar. I'll be able to answer those questions for you. So we have a lot of grounds to cover this evening. First of all, I want to talk about what we're going to do this evening. Our overview for today is to discuss the pre-qualification process of applying for discretionary funding. Secondly, we're going to look at what the process is to apply. What are the steps you need to take from step A, step B, step C? And then lastly, we're going to actually go into the actual application. We're going to look at the different parts that are really important that I want you to really focus in on when you're actually applying to discretionary funding. All right, sounds good. So a little bit about More Success Consulting Services. We partner and work with young and established business owners and executives, providing the business solutions and resources needed to meet your business needs and take your business to the next level. We also specialize in nonprofit consultation, nonprofit consulting, and nonprofit capacity building. We also provide tons of trainings to nonprofits throughout the year. So this is one of the trainings that you're receiving this evening. This is just a little bit about myself, Shaniqua Moore. I am the president and founder of More Success Consulting Services. A lot of my background has been in nonprofit work, also in social work, as well as government practice. As you can see, I am the president of More Success. I enjoy training individuals and teaching them how to start their companies, how to grow their businesses, and really teaching companies how to expand. I do a lot of trainings as well as a lot of speaking engagements. So if you're interested in learning more about my services or in booking future services, please feel free to contact me. You'll see my contact information at the end of this workshop. So some of our core services are nonprofit consulting. That really means strategic planning, capacity building, and board development. Staff and agency training, so really focusing on social service and human service agencies, and grant writing, looking at private, city, and state grants. So if you're interested in learning more about how to, again, find some more technical and hands-on assistance, then you can also feel free to reach out. And you'll see my contact information at the end of the webinar. So let's jump into the first part of our webinar, and that is pre-qualification. So we're here to learn about how to apply to discretionary funding. One of the things that I want to highlight this evening is that all applications have to be submitted online. There is a website that all applications, there's sort of a portal that you'll be able to access. You have to create your account, and I'll get more into that in just a few moments. But all applications have to be submitted online. There's no other way to submit your applications other than online. The other thing to note is that the application really is going to ask you about your organization's experience, qualifications, is going to ask you about your compliance history, as well as ask you for some important documentation. So we'll dig into that in just a minute. You have to be pre-qualified in order to apply for discretionary funding. There is a portal that New York City has launched in the last few years, which is called HHS Accelerator. So in order to apply for this year's fiscal year 2022 funding, you do have to be pre-qualified in HHS Accelerator. And at the end of this, I will be sending all of the attendees a list of all of the links that I'm also utilizing in today's webinar. You'll see here, the first link is actually where you would go to register and to be approved in HHS. And for those of you that are already approved in HHS Accelerator, then I would also admonish you to ensure that your account is kept updated and that your account doesn't expire, because you do have to update information in your account as necessary. But again, HHS Accelerator is required in order to become pre-qualified to apply to discretionary funding. The other thing to note is that organizations that are receiving over $10,000 will be required to complete the MOX capacity building training. And there's a link right here that I'm also going to be sending out to all of you on how to get into that training. That is a training that is required. So if you want to request over $10,000 to New York City as a nonprofit, then you will be required to take the capacity building training. Right now, as I can recall, all of the trainings are being held online. So you should be able to see any upcoming trainings through the link that's provided there. So the application deadline for discretionary funding this year is February the 16th, 2021. Please note that there will be no late applications accepted. So you have to you have to get it done on time. I can tell you that application will shut as soon as it hits 12 o'clock on this day. The application will close. So you want to make sure you get your applications in way before that. Get your documentation together and make sure you submit it on time. So this is sort of just an overview of the pre-qualification process. Again, you want to make sure you're registered with the Mayor's Office of Contracts. That is the email address provided right there in case you have any questions for the Mayor's Office of Contracts on how to become pre-qualified. They'll be able to answer any questions for you directly. Secondly, capacity building. You must take your capacity building training. Again, I provided the link in the previous slide, but I'll also be sending it out to all of the attendees so that you'll be able to also look at that on your own time. You also have to make sure you're pre-qualified in HHS Accelerator, again, which is a city portal that was established by New York City in the last few years to be able to ensure that all grants that are issued by the city is centralized. The other new thing that the city actually launched is Passport. This is another, it actually integrates with HHS Accelerator, but Passport is another requirement. So if you're looking for funding, your first time nonprofit, you also have to make sure that you create an account in Passport. And again, I will be sending you all these links so that you have the information after this webinar. Once you've gotten all of these things together, the next thing that you want to do is really complete your online discretionary application. So recap, you want to make sure you're pre-qualified in MOX. You have to take the capacity building training. You have to make sure that you have an account in HHS Accelerator as well as Passport. And then you want to be able to go ahead and take that application, complete that application online. All right, so let's jump into part 2, which is the discretionary process. So in this part, we'll be talking more about the steps. What do you need to do? So what is discretionary funding anyway? Discretionary funding is appropriated sum of money in the city's expense budget that's allocated to eligible not-for-profit organizations by the council or a council member. Again, stressing the fact that discretionary funding is only available to nonprofit organizations. So if you are not a nonprofit organization, you will not be able to apply to discretionary funding. The also very important thing to notice is that discretionary funding is a reimbursement-based program. So that means that if you're applying for funding, you should already have the money on hand to administer the program that you're asking the city to fund. And I will tell you that there are so many delays in getting funding with the city. So you really want to make sure that you're able to have the money up front so that you can cover whatever the expenses for that program is before you get that money, because it's going to take quite some time to get it. So to sum up, discretionary funding is the appropriated sum of money in the city's expense budget, allocated to eligible not-for-profit organizations. The other thing to note that it's allocated by your council member. So you should get to know who your council member is, where are you applying for funding at, what district in New York City, and really get to know that council member because they're the persons that will be allocating that funding on your behalf as an organization. So what is the vetting process for getting this funding? The General Counsel's Office at the City of New York, the New York City Council, is responsible for the vetting process. So there's a whole review that they have to go through. They have to make sure that you have an active EIN number from the IRS. They also have to make sure that your organization is actually a nonprofit. For newly created organizations, they're going to ask you for your incorporation documents. So you want to make sure you have that handy and ready to submit. They're also going to ask you for, they're going to look at your organization's past agency evaluations relating to those contract performances. So you also want to make sure you have all of this information handy. And this is just the vetting process to be able to get funding by the city. And for those of you that know this information, I do apologize. We're going to get into the application part, but this is just standard procedure. We just have to go through the formalities before we jump into the application. So the vetting process continued. There are different types of expense funding. Member discretionary funding is designated from sources that are specific to the council district. So again, you're going to be looking at who your council member is and who are you asking to fund your project, your program, or your organization. There's also speaker funding. So these are specific initiatives that the Speaker of New York City may be supporting. You can find out what those initiatives are, and you can also request funding for initiatives that are related to speaker funding. There's also member designated initiatives. These are things like CASA, A Greener New York City, or New York City Cleanup. Then there's citywide initiatives. So these are initiatives that you may be starting that spreads across the entire city. And these are also types of funding under discretionary that you'll be able to apply to. There's also borough-wide initiative. So funding that's designated by a borough delegation. Every borough has a borough delegation. Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Staten Island, Queens, every borough has a borough delegation. So if you're interested in applying for borough delegation, that's a larger pool of funding that you'll be able to sort of receive versus just asking for money from that one council member. You can ask for money from that council member, and you can also ask for money for the entire borough. So all of the council members in that borough, and they can make a decision to fund your project or to fund your program. So who is eligible for discretionary funding? You must be a nonprofit organization. You must provide community-based services. You could also be a religious affiliate organization. So if you're part of, if you're affiliated with a church or faith-based institution, you're also eligible. You must register with the New York State Attorney's General Charities Bureau. This is a requirement. So if you have not registered, again, I will be sending links out to all of you at the end so that you're able to get the information and get registered as soon as possible. You also obviously must be incorporated, you must be a nonprofit, and you also must have your EIN number. This is the link right here on the right side where you can actually look up your Charities Bureau status. So if you're not sure whether you register with New York State Charities Bureau, then you can actually look that up and check, make sure your filings are up to date. You don't want to, be out of your filing period and applying for discretionary funding, because that will be a basis to reject or deny your funding. All right, so when will you get your money? When will you get your funding? This is a process, okay? So there are a lot of different steps that have to be done before you get the money for your organization. When you submit your application to the council, what happens is that member or that city council person will then have to either approve your request or deny it. If that request makes it into the budget, what happens is it will be included in something called Schedule C. And Schedule C is sort of where all of the organizations within New York City, all of the organizations that are receiving funding, you're going to see it in that Schedule C. So it's essentially the budget of New York City. If you see your funding clear and Schedule C, that's how you know you receive the funding. What happens is budgeting starts in January of every new fiscal year. So right now, the budget for New York City is happening. The mayor and the council members are already coming together and discussing the budget that's going to be passed for the end of the fiscal year, which ends June 30th of this year and starts July 1st, the new fiscal year. So right now they're already in the budget process, which is why you have to submit your application by the required deadline. So once your application, if your application makes it, say you're approved, your council member gives it to you, you apply for $50,000, your council member approves it, it's made it into the budget has been passed, the fiscal year starts July 1st, 2022. You can expect your money, depending on the organization whereby your funding is being channeled through, your delay period may be about 3 to 9 months. And I'll talk to you a little more about why there's such a delay with funding in New York City. Obviously, COVID-19 being one of the major reasons why there's such a delay in funding with nonprofits. But the other reason is because the city process is very convoluted. There are so many different steps to it. So you want to be very versatile and understand what that process is, as well as make sure you have money up front to fund that program or that project before actually receiving the money into your organization account. The other thing is your contract is going to be sent to the comptroller's office. The comptroller has to approve your contract. So if your contract is not approved for whatever reason, they're going to bounce that back to you. They're going to contact whoever that contact person is on that application, and they will be asking you either to fix your documents or whether you left something out, they'll let you know, or if there are any legal issues or anything with your company, you'll have to rectify that first before your contract being approved by the comptroller's office. The comptroller has 30 days to approve or deny your contract. So this is also something to keep in mind. Once you receive that, once your application is approved, the new fiscal year starts, you have to make sure that contract is now approved. So, and that's a whole nother process. I'll probably teach another workshop on how to prepare to get your contract approved, because that's a whole separate workshop that I can't jump into right now. But just know that after the application is submitted, it is sent to the comptroller's office, and that contract must be approved before you receive that money that you were approved for. Right. Again, if you have questions, I know I'm probably going a little fast because I want to cover the application, but if you have any questions and you're just coming in, please feel free to use that Q&A part of Zoom. You will not be able to chat. The chat is disabled. And again, this session is being recorded. So if you came late, you'll be able to get the recording after the session so that you can review whatever you missed. So now we're into our application review. So first things first, your application is this is where you're going to request you're going to complete your application. This is the actual link. So you're going to click on this link and it's going to take you to the application. And I'm going to come back here because I want to open it up so you can see what it looks like. But the application, again, is going to be at this link, and you'll be getting that link as well after this workshop. There's a checklist. There are a lot of documents that you need to make sure you have in place before you get to the application. Some of these things are very basic. You obviously have to have your FEIN number, your New York State Charities Bureau registration number. You need to have your annual operating budget. So if you don't know what your organization budget is, you're going to need to talk to the accountant of your organization or whoever it is that controls the budget of your organization so that you can make sure you input that information into the application. You also need to make sure you're pre-qualified, again, an HHS accelerator. And there's a training that the city holds with HHS Accelerator. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please follow up with me and I can send that information out. You need the staffing of your organization. So you need to know who's working for your organization, who's going to be working for the program that you're asking to be funded. You need your certificate of incorporation if you were incorporated after July 1st, 2019. You need the current list of your board members and high executive level employees. You also need to keep track and you need a list of that. And then also note that you need the Adobe Reader in order to view and print the PDF documents that's found at the end of the application. So this is your application checklist. These are all the things. You can screen print this if you want. You can take a picture of it if you like, but this is what you need to make sure you have in order to apply to the discretionary funding. So what does the application look like anyway? There are 7 parts to the discretionary application. The first part deals with the instructions. This is very basic. In the instructions part, you're going to list your information for the organization. You're going to list the mission. It's going to really give you an overview of the grant, but at the same time, it's going to give you a checklist similar to the one that I just showed you in the previous slide. So this checklist right here, you're going to see that in the instructions part, the first part when you first log in into the application. The second thing is it's going to ask you for your budget information. So you need to make sure you have this information. Please do not make up a number. Make sure it's the actual number of your budget. So your budget information should be inputted into the organization part of the application. Also make sure you have your organization mission and your organization goals is going to go into the second part of the discretionary application. The third part is going to ask you about the request details. So this really is the meat of your application. This is where you're going to talk about your project, your program, or your organization. This is where they want to know, what are you looking to do in the district? What service are you providing? What programs are you asking to provide to the community? This is the most important part, and I'm going to jump more into this in just a few moments. The fourth part of the application will ask you about affiliations. So if you have any religious or public affiliations with elected officials, you do need to disclose that in the part 4 of the discretionary application. Part 5, they're going to ask you questions about whether you've read the policies, whether you understand the procedures, and you have to acknowledge and accept that you have. Step 6 or part 6 of the application, this is really important because a lot of people don't know that this is at the end of the application, but these 4 documents, they are required. There's no way around it. So make sure you have this handy. And again, when you log into the grant gateway, which I'll be showing you in just a few moments, when you log into it, you'll be able to see these documents at the end. They have to be completed and uploaded back into that system before you submit the application. So do make sure that you complete those documents. And then lastly, the last part of it, which is part 7, is reviewing the application. You want to make sure that you sign and submit it. If you did not submit it, that means it's not submitted, which means it doesn't count. So make sure you actually review all the information before you submit it. Make sure it's accurate, look over it for any errors or any grammar or any issues, and make sure it is perfect as it can be. Sign it electronically and submit. Make sure you press that submit button when you're ready, because once you submit it, there's no turning back. If you don't submit it and it's not submitted by the deadline, there's no turning back. The city will not break their guidelines for you. So make sure you're adhering to the guidelines and to the deadline that they have set out, which is February the 16th by 11:59 p.m. So some of the things that you need to consider before I open up the application is which agency are you interested in requesting funding from? So are you interested in requesting funding from New York City Department of Education, from ACS, from Department of Cultural Affairs, from DYCD. What agency do you want to contract with? Who do you want to work with? You need to know that before you submit that application because it's going to ask you that. So make sure you know that beforehand. And if you don't know, excuse me, if you don't know that, you might want to take a look at all the city agencies, what their initiatives are, and really align your program closely to what agency really matches or aligns with your mission. Is your program connected to a city initiative? So what is your program about anyway? Is it connected to something that the city is supporting, such as pre-K for all? Is it connected to that? If it is, then that's actually a good thing because you can apply for a greater amount of funding if it's a city initiative. The other thing is the city may actually prioritize your application if it's something that supports what the city is already prioritizing, if that makes sense. Mental health is another city initiative. Children under 5 is a city initiative. Domestic violence is a city initiative. Any of those things that fall under those categories that you may be seeking to apply to, you can center your application on that city initiative. The other thing, and very important that you want to think about, is where will your programs take place? Or where are you looking to have your, and if you already have an organization and you're looking to sort of expand into other catchment areas or in other districts, this is a question you should also be asking, right? So you might be operating in specific district areas, but you might want to think about expanding into other areas within either your borough or into other places in New York City. Where is it? Why do you want to expand to that place? What roots or connections or ties do you have to that community? Do you know that council member? Are you connected to the community? Are your programs running there yet? My suggestion to you is you should have something already active and running in that district before applying for any funding in that district. Council members are least likely to fund organizations that are not operating and not benefiting their community. So make sure, again, wherever district you choose or select, you have some kind of roots in that district, or that you have an organization that's already up and running or active in that district. The other thing you want to think about is, do you want to apply for borough-wide funding? And I mentioned this a little earlier. You can apply for borough-wide funding. You can also apply for citywide funding, right? So it depends on the scale of your organization. Can your organization handle that? Does it have the capacity to handle something borough-wide? Does it have the capacity to handle something citywide? These are questions that you really need to sit down and think about and make a decision on. So these are this is now getting into more parts of the application that's really important. One of the parts is called request details, and I'm going to actually start opening up my screen so that I can get to that part. But in the request details part of the application, there is really, again, a lot of information that the city is going to be asking you because they want to know exactly what are you doing? What are you trying to do? What is your program that you're trying to open? They want to know all this information. So what I'm going to do, if you just bear with me for a moment, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go to that application, open it up. So I can't show my organization's application for confidentiality purposes, but I will try to pull up. I should have had a template for you all. All right, this is great. So let me share my screen. Just give me one moment to get back over here. Perfect. All right. So this is what the application looks like when you actually get into it. So if you see here, what you're looking at, this is actually my organizations, but you can't see any of my organization details, obviously, excuse me, for confidentiality purposes. But if you look here, you'll see the 7 parts that I was talking about. There's the instructions, there's the organization and contact information. We're in the request details part. There's the affiliations, the acknowledgements, the attachments, and the reviewing of your application. I want to spend the rest of our time looking at this application because I think this is why we're really here tonight. So you'll notice on the top of this, this is your request details. This is what you want to pay the most attention to. They're going to ask you, how much money are you applying to? You will notice that the minimum award is $5,000. So you cannot apply for $1,500. You can't apply for $3,000. It has to be a minimum of $5,000. Also note, if you're a new organization, you cannot apply for no more than $10,000. So if you never received discretionary funding, you're a new nonprofit, do not put more than $10,000, because what will happen is they will either deny it, your entire application, or they will just ignore it. So make sure, again, that you're putting the right amount. How much do you ask for? That depends on your budget. So you really need to look at your budget. What are your other funding sources? Are you getting funding from other places? Are you receiving funding from your board of directors, from private funding, from corporations, from other agencies? You really want to find out where where the deficit is and how much you're applying to for discretionary. My advice to you is don't put all of your don't just apply to discretionary funding. There's so many other types of funding out there, and I teach that at other workshops. So if you're interested in joining those workshops, I will be sending my contact information at the end. Now, again, how much you decide to ask for, that is up to you, your organization, the officers of your organization, but you want to make sure you put the right amount. Don't put too much, don't put too little. Put the right amount. The next thing this is really important, and this one right here, I actually got into a lot of trouble with this with my organization when I selected the wrong contracting agency. So I don't want you to make the mistake I made. Now, the contracting agency, as you can see, there's so many of them, right? There's so many to choose from. So how do you know who to select? My advice is to have a meeting with your council member and ask them that question, because they may have a preference in terms of how they sort of channel your request. They may say, well, organizations like yours, we like to put that through DCLA, through the Department of Cultural Affairs. Now, be aware that if you're going to put DCLA as your contracting agency, there's a whole nother process that you have to complete to make sure your application is done. And this wouldn't be the only one. There'd be whole nother website and a whole nother application that you have to submit. So that's another workshop again. But again, you want to make sure that you select the right contracting agency. So there are all these different contracting agencies that you can select. There's the fire department, there's the police department, there's CUNY, there's DCLA, there's the Department of Cultural Affairs, Department of Youth and Community Development, Department of Mental Health, and Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. So there are all these agencies. You have to make sure that you select the right agency. Another word of advice, if you're working with young people, if your organization, your target population is youth, I would advise that you select DYCD. Why? Because that is the Department of Youth and Community Development. So, but one thing I want to also flag is if you apply for DYCD funding, you're going to have to upfront the money. So for example, if you say I want $60,000, don't expect them to give you the money up front. They're going to want to see you spend that money first, and then they're going to pay you. They're going to reimburse you for the money after you have spent it. So just, please take note of that. If you do apply and you say, I want to do DYCD, you're going to have to upfront the money. So again, make sure you have that money and handy. There's other ways to get funds, and I talk about that in other workshops that I have. So, again, find the right contracting agency. Secondly, they're going to ask you, is the organization seeking funding related to speaker initiatives? You need to know this, yes or no. I always select yes, because for my organization, we always go under certain funding, certain initiative funding, and one of them is actually CASA. So I'm trying to see if I can find it down here. Excuse my eyes. If I don't find it, it should be okay. But yeah, so you have to know what the different speaker initiatives are. If you don't know that, take time to do some research to find it out. This is also really important because certain council members will prioritize certain speaker initiatives. So again, there is a benefit to selecting this. You just need to know how to do it. Now, I'm going to the next part of this. This is council member. This is very, very, very important. I have made the mistake, and I don't want you to make this mistake. I've made the mistake in selecting everyone. I went on a whole discretionary like frenzy. I was like, I'm applying for everyone, and I just checked all of them off, and I was like, yeah, I'm so excited. They're all gonna approve me. That is a no-no. Don't do it. Don't do it. Not best practices. So what you want to do, you want to be very strategic, okay? So think about it. Where's your organization at? And if you don't have one yet, where are you looking to do business? Where are you looking to start your organization? And whatever that council district is, that's where you want to select. You'll notice here that the council districts are listed by the council members' names. So if you have no idea what districts they cover, there's a website, and I'll also send that to you at the end, that you can look up to find out which district do these council members cover. Because you don't want to select, say, Rivera, and you're all the way in Johnson's district, because then they're going to look at it like this is a waste of time. They're going to reject it. So make sure. Now, I'm not discouraging you from applying for multiple council members. You can do that, but the right way to do it is by creating a new application. Do not select more than one council member on one application. If you need to select multiple council members, then you'd have to do it under a new application. Okay, I hope that was very clear. So moving on to the next part. Has any principal, authorized official, or executive member of the organization ever applied for discretionary funding as a representative of another organization? This is very important. So if you sit on a board at another organization, or if you're an officer of another organization that receives funding and you've applied on their behalf, you have to disclose that here. You want to, and you don't want to lie to the city, so be transparent as possible. Okay? Going into inquiry investigation. This section is really trying to, excuse me, I just saw personal information. Let's delete, apologize for that. This question really is going to be asking you about whether or not there's been any independent audits on your organization. If there have been, federal, state, local, you need to disclose that. Don't be afraid to disclose it. If it's something that's still open and you're still trying to figure it out, just know that before they give you the money, they need to see that completed and done away with. They need to make sure everything has been paid out. Okay, so make sure you answer honestly with this part. All right, we're going down to the purpose of use of funds. This is really the meat of your application here. So you'll notice that now they're asking you more about, tell me about your organization. Tell me why you want this money. This is where you paint that narrative, whatever that story is that your organization has. You want to put the name of your program. And one of the things that you want to do, try to put a name that makes sense. So when the council member is looking at it, it should be something that resonates with them. I wouldn't put something like ABC daycare. That's a little, it doesn't really stand out. I would put something again that really highlights what the program is about and highlight what the program does. Okay, and it's okay to change the name as long as it's consistent with your documents. And then here, you want to include a description of the programming. Okay, so we all learned in school when we were younger, who, what, where, when, why, and how, right? That goes for any grant application you fill out. You have to answer those questions. Who is this organization? What is this organization? Who's involved in the organization? What is the organization about? How are you going to do it? How are you going to provide these services? You really should be digging very deeply into your organization, right? Go into detail, go deep. And again, if you haven't yet established your organization, that is okay. You should be putting your proposed programming in this part, okay? So your programming, your services is going to go into this field. Right. The other thing to note, there's no character limit on here, no character count. So go as much as you want, but still try to keep it concise and clear. One of the things that I try to do, I try to use spaces, and then I try to do caps, because you can't use you can't put the italics or bold. So try to do it where the person that's reviewing the application can see that it makes sense, that it's organized, that it's concise, and it's easy on the eye to read. Okay. So some of the things you can do, you can indent when you start a new paragraph. You can use caps. So you can start off with something like programs, and you can do that part, and then maybe you want to have another section and you want to go into services, and really just go into it. And then you maybe want to have something with goals, right? So you see that I've already sort of separated each of the sections, and then I'm just going to go in and talk about my program. What program am I trying to provide, or what program am I providing now? What services are under that program, and what are the goals? So again, these are some very main items that you want to have on your application when you're filling out this part. Going into when will this operate? This is super important. And I know with COVID, there have been a lot of modifications to our programs and services, where we've had to modify a lot of how we do things, or when we actually meet. So make sure it reflects your current operations, your current. So when will the program operate? Is it going to operate 5 days a week? Is it going to operate once a week? When will it operate? You want to make sure you put the right. And what I like to do, so for example, if my program operates Monday through Friday, I'll state something like Monday through Friday. And if it's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and then I'll say something like, in accordance with the New York City Department of Education. And I wouldn't put acronyms. I'm just doing that just for the purposes of demonstration. But I would be very clear and concise about this is when it operates. And then I also say year long, so we don't have any breaks in our sessions. We go around wraparound services, right? So you want to make sure you specify whatever that again, that timeline is. Target population, very important. Who are you serving? Who's your organization serving? But right here, you really want to talk about who the program is serving. So you might have an organization that is multi-service and that may serve a wide range of ages. You might serve elderly, children, adults. But for this specific program that you're asking the council member to fund, what is the target population? Obviously, in my case, my organization serves kids ages 5 through 18. So I'm always probably going to select this. But you have to find out who your target population is, and you have to put that in on the application. All right. Now, moving on to geographic area. This is also super important. I want you to pay attention to this part. Now, if you're asking for money from a council member, do not put citywide. No. Because once they see that, they're going to say, okay, well, that is not really specific to my district. I don't know if I'm going to prioritize that. So for example, if you're applying for funding in District 12, you're going to put District 12, right? It makes sense. It's pretty self-explanatory. So make sure you put the correct area where you want that program to operate, or where that program is operating. All right. Now going on into staffing, this right here is the next part of the application. And in this part, they want to know who's going to be running these programs. What are their qualifications? So what are the qualifications of these individuals? What degrees do they have? What's their experience? You should really list that out in this part of the application. You should also talk about what's unique. What's unique about the staffing? Are they volunteers, or are they paid? You should also mention that here, okay? But again, talk about how the staff are invested in the clients. Talk about how they're invested in the community. Are the staff from the community? Really paint a good picture of who the staffing are. Moving on to the next part is community benefit. So you want to, in this part, think about all of the benefits of your program. And you might have this already written out in another grant, or maybe you've never written it out, but you want to make sure you write out all of the benefits. So what are the benefits? It may do something like improve safety improve community safety. Maybe that's a benefit, right? Or maybe you're reducing crime, or maybe you're improving school safety. Whatever those benefits are, you shouldn't, I wouldn't recommend listing them like this. If you list them, I would go into detail. So if you wanted to sort of do like a list and then you wanted to segment each benefit, you can do that. One of the things I also like to do is like an interlude. So I like to do an intro and at the top of it and say something like, this program has, this program really supports children in early development and so many ways. And then, or, you know, I probably wouldn't say that, but then you would just a demonstration, then you would go into detail about how. So you can do a quick little intro. All right, I see a question coming in and I will get to it in just a moment after I get through this part. So the next one is, please provide a description of what the organization does and plans to do to invite the community. This is important because, again, this is public funds. So you can't be asking for money and then you're excluding people out. They want to make sure that if they're funding this, the city is funding this, it should be getting out to as many people as possible. So how are you going to invite the community? Are you using social media? Are you using word of mouth? I know we used to do a lot of tabling, but this may be a little hard with COVID. Are you tabling? Are you sending out mailers? Like, what are you doing to invite the community? You have to think about the disabled, those that are disabled. Think about the elderly. They may not go on social media. So how are you going to make sure they get the information? Okay, you got to think about those things. Now, this is also very important. Let me say this. If you're an organization that has multiple sites, make sure you're putting the site that's in that district or in that borough that you're applying for funding in. Because if you put a site in that's not specific to that district or borough, that council member may reject your application. So if you're applying again in District 12, you should be putting an address that's in District 12. I'm just going to put Co-op City. I won't put like the full address, right? Obviously, that's not an actual postal address, but you want to put in the district an address that's in that district. So make sure, again, you consult with whoever the executives are of your company to make sure you're putting the correct location in this part, because that will count. All right, I'm going to pause for a second and see if I can take this question from Carl. So the question is, what if you are a small organization and your staff is currently serving as the officers of your organization? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so, and I'm not sure, Carl, if you meant your board members or the officers being staff, but I'll answer it twofold. So that's very, very common when you're a small organization. Your officers, whether they're board of directors or whether they're the officers, your top officers, they may not necessarily be getting paid at the moment, or they are getting paid. Whatever the situation is, you should list out those staffing. So for example, and that's a great question. I like that question. When you are answering who briefly describe the staffing for the program, you should list out the officers. So if they're the ones that's providing the service, and if you're providing the service, please put yourself down too. So if you're a CEO of the company and you're providing the service, you should put down who you are, what are your qualifications, how are you qualified to run this program? That's really what this question is asking. So the answer to that would be yes. You should also put down the officers of your organization under the staffing part. Hope that answered it. All right. So going under fees now, do you charge for your services? Now, as a nonprofit, obviously, it's really difficult to bring in money. So if you want to charge for your fees for your program, you can do that. But you have to make sure you disclose that. You have to be transparent about it. And if you don't, that's fine. You can, you select no. But if you do, you have to select yes. Right. Going into capacity on the bottom now. This is really interesting because in this part, and I can't go into everything because we're getting a little behind time, but in this part, what they want to know is, have you done this before? Have you provided this service before? And if you haven't, what qualifies you to provide this service? Now, I'm going to show you how to answer that. If you've done this service, so if they say something like, has the organization proposed similar services in the past? And you say no, because you're new. What you can do is describe right here what qualifications your organization has. But you want to focus more on the staffing, right? So this is where, again, that question from Carl came about the officers. You're welcome, Carl. So that question about the officers, this is when you're going to talk about the officer qualifications. You want to talk about the experience. Maybe your organization is new, but maybe the officers have been in the field for quite some time. You should definitely highlight that in this section, okay? So really go into detail, talk about their accomplishments, talk about the projects that they have spearheaded that's similar to the proposed services. Now, if you're answering yes to this question and you've done this before, you should really focus in on what have been your accomplishments? So you've done this. What have you accomplished? Have you done it? What's the impact? Have people have they benefited from the services in the past? Okay. And then towards the ending of this now, they're going to ask you whether the organization received funding last fiscal year. If you have, you should say yes, and you should say how was it utilized. Okay, one of the things I want to highlight here now, if you're an organization and you received money last year, but you've gotten multiple allocations, you have to talk about each allocation separately. Okay, so for example, say you got CASA in District 12, and then you got CASA in District 11, oops, and then you got CASA in District 28. You have to talk about each of these separately. So you have to describe, how much did you get? What did you do with that money? They want to know that there's actually been some kind of return on investment, okay? And then lastly over here, if you are an organization that has any regulating entities such as Department of Education, Department of Health, New York State Office of Children and Family Services, any entity that evaluates your performance, you have to be transparent and you have to list all of those performance evaluations right here. All right, so that's very important. And then the last part of this, they're asking you whether you're going to be delivering this yourself or whether you'll be subcontracting. You can subcontract, but you should also, they want to know whether or not you have the capacity. So I wouldn't suggest subcontracting. If you could do this yourself as an organization, you have the capacity to do it, I would say, keep the money within the organization. All right, so that is the application again. The other parts of this is really going over the affiliations. So they're asking you whether there have been any private affiliations or any public. Do you have any affiliations with any elected officials? Disclose that if you do. Number 5, you're going to acknowledge that you understand their policies and procedures. Number 6, this is where you get the documents. So those 4 documents that I was talking about earlier, the certificate of authorization, the conflict of interest disclosure, the organization elected official disclosure, and then here, this is not required, but I always suggest doing it anyway. They give you an option to upload any advertising, and then also your board of directors. So if you have any material, marketing material, you can put it here. I mean, I don't see why not. I would do it. All right, and then obviously at the end, you're reviewing your application. It's going to tell you here if there's anything that's missing. So you'll see like all the red things, like stop, you can't submit it. So again, review everything before you submit it and make sure you press submit. All right, so I hope that was helpful. I'm going to switch back over into our presentation. Just give me one moment to get back over here so we can go through the remainder, and then we'll open it up for any Q&A. All right, so some of the things that I suggest, and these are just my best practices that I do within my organization. This is a timeline. We're in the month of January. So you see January through June. Now, what happens is you're going to submit your application in January, right? The application closes February. So make sure you submit it February 16th. You should be following up with your council members. Now, There's some information out there that says if you follow your council members, you should be documenting how much efforts financially you're putting into following up with them, because that could be considered lobbying. Some new information that I just found out. So if you want more information about that, I could definitely send that over to you. But lastly, you should be confirming, did you receive that money? And you can track that yourself. So if you don't want to go the route with following up directly with the council member or with the city, you can track it another way. You can track it. There's a website where you can go to track your money. Okay. Some best practices: make sure before you apply for money, you have a strong presence in a community that you're seeking to serve. Make sure your programs are active in that district. Make sure you have some starting money before you actually apply, because there's going to be delays. Make sure you have a working relationship with your elected officials that you're asking money from. Also, when you submit your application, save your application number, keep it in a safe place. Keep copies of your application. There's a way, once you submit it, they're going to give you a copy of it through email. Don't delete that email. Save it and put it in a drive or online safe depository. Track your application. This is where you go. I'm just going to pull it up so you can see what it looks like. So this is where you go to track your application. So if you want to find out whether you've gotten the money, you can just put the name of your organization in, and you'll be able to see whether or not they've awarded you that money. Here are some challenges, and because I know that this is also probably what some of you may be thinking about. COVID-19. Obviously, New York City is in a deficit where our budget is really suffering. The other thing is there's been so many budget cuts. So don't be discouraged if you experience budget cuts in your organization, or if your council member doesn't award the full amount, or if they can't award you this year. Don't be discouraged by that, because it may happen, but not to worry. Keep those relationships brewing so that you can apply again the next year. Expect delays. This is, if you run the organization where you're expecting delays, you'll always make sure you're ahead of the game. Expect at least 6 to 9 months before you actually get that money. So if you get approved July 1st, 2021, you're probably not going to see that money until sometime maybe February 2022. That's a big gap. So make sure you are planning for those times when you're not getting the payments. So this is where the other funding sources come into play. This is where you have to work with your accountant and really make sure that you have enough cushion in the budget to cover your operating expenses. This is really, really important. Cultural organizations. If you're a cultural organization, or if you're an art organization and you're going to apply through DCLA, you have to submit another application that's separate from what we just went over tonight. And this is the link. So I'm going to just open it up. Oops. Open it up really quickly for you. So this is where you would go if you, and I made this, this was a mistake I made, believe me, I don't want you to make that mistake. So if you are a cultural organization, or you're also an art organization, you have to apply through DCLA, and they call it the CDF, which is a Cultural Development Fund, I believe it is. Yeah, so you have to make sure you also apply through here, okay? All right, so if you need any assistance completing your discretionary application, you can send me an email. That's my email. You can screen print it if you like, sales@morescs.com, and I provide assistance in completing it on your behalf, or I provide assistance and helping you complete it. So that is also something that I offer. Excuse me, let me clarify. I only guide you in completing it. I can't really go in and complete the application for you, but I can provide you tips and tools one-on-one on how to fill it out for your organization. All right, so if you have any questions specifically about discretionary funding, direct it to the city. That is their email address right there. Take a picture of it, write it down, discretionary@council.nyc.gov. So again, if you have any questions about discretionary funding, you want to contact them there. All right, so stay connected. These are all the platforms where you can follow me on, so you can get more resources and information on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. That's my name right there, Shaniqua E. Moore, and that is our website, www.morescs.com. So feel free to reach out. should you need any further assistance. These are the links. I'm going to add to this so you can take a picture of it, and you're also, again, after this workshop, you're going to get an extensive link, an extensive list of all the links that we discussed today, so that you can have it available and at your disposal anytime that you need to refer to it. All right, so I want to open it up for any questions. We have 15 minutes left. So if there are any questions that you have for me, please go into the Q&A part of the Zoom and ask your questions, and I would love to answer it for you. Any questions, please put it in the Q&A box. Again, the chat is disabled, so you will not be able to chat. But again, you can go into the Q&A box, put your questions. I'll give it about 3 minutes. So because some of you may need to type it in, I'll give you about 3 minutes. And as you're waiting, this is my contact information here. So if you are interested specifically in trainings for your staff or for your agency, that is the email that you would use. And if you're interested in more one-on-one services, then you would use this email right here. That's the direct number to reach me. So if you want to follow up with me after this and chat a little bit about the process, you can do so there. All right, I see a question you came in. What other workshops do you provide? That's a great question. So I'm actually providing a workshop on Saturday, which is called the Nonprofit Experience, excuse me. And we're going to be going into grant writing and policies and procedures for your nonprofit. I also do series on visioning in crisis. So how to prepare your organization when you're in a crisis, such as what we're in now. I also do workshops on capacity building. So if you're looking to expand your nonprofit or expand your organization, you can contact me. Also workshops on, for those of you that work directly with young people, a lot of different techniques, interventions that you can utilize. We're working with families of color or families that are in at-risk communities. So thanks for that question, Carl. Laura, hi, Laura. Good to see, well, I can't see you, but good to see that you're here. How long should people expect to take for a decision on the application? So that's a great question. Now, and I don't want to give you like a specific timeline, but what happens is essentially the New York City, they will pass a sort of like a drafted budget in March. So what I would suggest is that if once you submit your application, follow up with that council member or follow up with New York City. I would say no later than April. And the reason why I say that is because I know that as a nonprofit, you also have to plan for your expenses, right? So I know the city a lot of times are like, well, we don't know, we don't have an answer yet, but I would try to get an answer by April. I would say by April, the latest. You're going to know by July 1st whether or not you've got that money. So you're going to use that tracker that I showed you earlier that I'm also going to be sending out to you. Laura, thanks for that question. So again, check in with your council members by April, but you can expect a decision no later than July 1st, because that's the new fiscal year. So you'll be able to go in at that point. Now, if you did not get funding, I have seen situations where the council member may have denied it initially, but then they may say, you know what, I'm actually gonna approve this after the budget was passed. In that case, there may be a budget modification process. Whole nother story. And in that case, there'll be further delays. So you might wait probably like a whole year before you see that money. All right, Brenda I made the mistake of picking the wrong agency and was turned down. Do I just change the agency or start all over? All right, so Brenda, if you're talking about, if it's this year, so if you've done it this year and you selected the wrong agency, I would do a new application. So I would do a whole new application with the right agency, and then I would let the council member know that you submitted the application. So just keep track of that application number so that you can also reference it when you speak to your council member. But yeah, I know what it's like, Brenda. I get it. It's not easy. It's not easy. I've been there. I've been in your shoes. But good thing is it's a new year, a new fiscal year rolling around. So make sure you select the right agency this time so that you don't get disqualified for funding that I'm sure you would make great use of. All right, Catherine are you able to assist with discretionary application from different states other than New York? This is a great question, and the answer is yes, but this discretionary funding here is only for New York-based organizations. But if you're interested in booking me and you're in another state, I also help organizations that are outside of the New York area. Thanks, Catherine, for that question. Jacqueline, I've submitted my application already. However, I applied to 2 council persons and 1 application. All right. Before I say resubmit, Jacqueline, my question to you is, do those council members know each other? Are they, and when I say that, are they neighboring council members? So is it sort of like District 13 and 14? If the answer is yes, I would keep it as is. If the answer is no, I would resubmit it, because most likely it's going to get thrown out. Okay, Brenda, are your services available to write grants? Yes, I do write grants. I also work with RFPs, requests for proposals. So if you're interested in larger contracts, which I always tell nonprofits to go after, that are multi-year, that can keep you running for at least 3 to 5 years, then I definitely say go after that, and I can also assist with that. Thanks, Brenda. Jacqueline, also, all of the requirements have been completed. HHS, passport, MOX, DYCD is the chosen city agency. How long will it take for them to contact me? Yes, this is a good question, Jacqueline. I would say what I have seen in my time is once you submit the application, it's approved. The city council clears you. They send it over to the agency to be cleared. They normally contact you sometime in October. So if you don't hear anything by October, that's a red flag. You should be reaching out to somebody. And there is an email address that I will leave when I send out all the materials, so that you can also follow up with them should that happen. But I would say no later than October, they should be reaching out to you with next steps. Also, no, if you're doing DYCD, you have to upfront the cost. So that they're gonna ask you, how did you spend this money? And you have to down to the dollar. So if you bought a pencil for $1, you're gonna have to show $1 pencil. I bought it from Staples on August 8, 2021. It's a nightmare. So keep good books, okay? Keep every expense. Get a good accounting system if you don't have one. I have some suggestions if you need some, but definitely keep track of all your expenses, because when it comes time for reimbursement, you're gonna want your money right away. You're not going to want no problems, okay? All right, great questions. Carl, what is the certainty of getting funded as a new organization? So what I would say is, Carl, and that's a great question, because it's really not certain, right? We're in a very uncertain time. The other thing is with discretionary, it really is member-based. So as long as you have a good relationship with your council member, then you should really, they should be very transparent with you about whether they're going to fund you or not. And I would just have that, you can have the conversation with them. That's okay. It's absolutely okay. It's your right to know that, right? But I would start reaching out to my council member, just saying hello and letting them know who you are, what you do, so they can become more acquainted with you. Great question. Jacqueline, there are neighboring council districts. Yeah, so I think it's okay to keep those. I would also look to do a little more research, Jacqueline, on those council members. So I would look at what caucuses they're a part of, what committees they sit on. Do they do any initiatives together? If yes, I would keep it. If they're completely different in terms of what they care about and the causes they support, separate them. I would resubmit it. Okay. So again, you want to do, and that's something I didn't mention earlier, but you should research that council member. Every council member has specific things that they care about and that they support. Make sure you're aware of what those are. So you don't want to waste their time, right? And it also should be a need for the community. And then Brenda says, I will contact you tomorrow. Great, Brenda, looking forward to hearing from you. So I'm gonna close our Q&A session. That's my contact information right there. So if there are any other questions and you wanna reach out, feel free to contact me, call me. Email is always best. Send me an email, whatever it works best for you. And I look forward to hearing from each of you should you follow up. The other thing that I want to mention is I am teaching a workshop on Saturday, which is titled The Nonprofit Experience. And if you're interested in being a part of that workshop, I do, it's a longer workshop, so it's about 4 hours, but I do advise you to attend. I'll be sending follow-up information with that as well. So I'm wishing all of you a great night, all of you success in your endeavors and your nonprofits. Continue making a difference, continue moving forward in your community. And I wish all of you the best as you apply for this funding. All right, have a great night, everyone.